Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Mike Abrashoff, who became the most junior commanding officer of the Pacific Fleet at the age of 36. And in fact, he took over perhaps one of the most underperforming naval warships and completely turned it around and, in fact, has written a super best-selling book. Mike, a real pleasure to have you.
My pleasure, Doug. Thanks for having me.
So people often talk about having a military background as being great to develop your leadership on the one hand. On the other hand, people say, the military is just so filled with bureaucracy that it's not really about leadership. It's just about prayer that everything should work out okay. How did your experiences there help you to become the leader that you are?
Well, I think that perception is changing because our adversaries are changing, and the military, both in your country and in the U.S., have had to adapt and to become more entrepreneurial in order to face the challenges that we face. And so when I took command of this ship, 13 years ago, we didn't get to choose our missions, and I couldn't choose my sailors that were assigned to me by the Navy, and I couldn't go back and ask for more money. And, I'm feeling sorry for myself thinking, I'm never going to get promoted again because I'm not smart enough to turn this ship around. We weren't quite the worst ship in the Pacific Fleet, but we were probably third or fourth from the bottom. Right. And I decided, I'm going to focus on the things that I can influence. And I decided that what I'm going to try to do is to change people's attitudes and to get them to take greater sense of accountability and responsibility for themselves, and that I was going to give them the training necessary to be successful. But what I didn't want them to do was fear raising their hand and telling me if they saw something on the front line that I should be aware of. And the rap that the military has is, you just follow orders. I wanted my sailors to follow orders, but I wanted to have ironclad discipline, and I wanted them to feel comfortable to raise their hand and say, hey, you might want to think about this. And so just by engaging them, treating them with respect, listening to them, we became the leader in our industry, and we became very entrepreneurial at the time. And we came up with new solutions to age-old problems. And our retention rate went from 8% before I took command of the ship to almost 100%. Wow. In my last year in command of the ship, we operated our ship on 75% of our operating budget. And it wasn't like I was, badgering the crew to save money. It was, hey, spend money as if it's coming out of your own pocket. If you wouldn't spend your own money on something, don't expect the taxpayers to fund it. So it was about a shared sense of responsibility. And I found people really responded to that. And they stayed with us, and they performed superbly. And, we controlled our own destiny. Because, I told them we're not playing to come in number two, we're playing to win. So it was all about having that engaged workforce who had the desire to win and the know-how. And I tried to treat them, with respect and dignity in the way I wish I had been treated coming up through the ranks.
So how can you get the people, as it were, on board, get your sailors on board to have that kind of attitude when at the end of the day, if you have let's say a lower level sailor, he's not going to get the credit probably that's due that the captain will get for all the great work. And I think you see this in a lot of businesses as well, that, at the end of the day, they give the big raises and the big bonuses to the guys on top.
Well, what I did was if a general or an admiral came on board, I let one of the most junior sailors escort him around the ship. And it wasn't about me getting face time. I put my sailors in a position to get the face time and to get the recognition. And it's something that had never been done before in the Navy. And they took tremendous pride in the fact that I recognized that they're people, even if they're doing some of the most menial work on the ship, I wanted them to understand that the rest of us can't do our job if they don't do their job. And what I would do is, every day I would walk the ship and I'd search out the sailors doing the seemingly most menial work to talk to them and to thank them and to commend them so that they take even greater ownership. But what I also did, I had a crew of 310 young men and women. I interviewed every sailor on the ship individually. Each interview took 20 or 30 minutes, and I got to know their names, their spouses' names, their children's names, their hometowns. I asked them what their goals were while they were in the Navy. And what it enabled me to do was to be visibly seen by them, to care about their careers and their promotions. And what I used these interviews to do was to help them get additional education or training if that's what they wanted, so that they could further their own careers. So even though, I would ultimately get credit for, having a great ship, they got credit as well, and they got recognized by the system. And when I took command of the ship, my crew was advancing at less than 68% of the Navy average. By the time I left, they were advancing at more than 250% of the Navy average. So that you can design a system where everybody wins, and that's what we tried to do on the ship.
It's an amazing attitude as well. We're talking with Mike Abrashoff, who has spoken about the lessons that he learned in leadership when he was the captain of the USS Benfold. And in fact, he wrote a book. It became an instant bestseller called It's Your Ship. Mike, let's talk a little bit more about the business world. A lot of times people will see that someone left the military and went into business and took on a leadership position. If you were investing in a company, is that one of the criteria that you might consider?
Well, the military has its strengths and its weaknesses. And if I was a CEO, I would want a former military person to be running operations, because military folks can execute with precision. And I think most military people have a high sense of integrity and ethics, and can execute on a strategy that is designed, from above. I never was asked my opinion for what our strategy should be. And so I was probably at a disadvantage when I left the military of, that strategic thinking piece. But when it comes to execution and getting things done, I don't think there's anybody better in the world than people who come from a military background. So my answer would be, it depends on the job you want them to do. And I think most military members are outstanding in operations and execution and safety and jobs of that sort.
One of the things we spoke about earlier was about entrepreneurs, and one of the characteristics of entrepreneurs are often that they are so excited about different ideas that it's a little bit hard for them to focus in one area. Is there a tool that you can advise someone, because my guess is you've spoken to a lot of people like that, to help them to begin a project, see it through to completion, and become tops in their field?
Well, in my interviews with the sailors, I asked 3 additional questions. What do you like most about Benfold? What do you like least? And what would you change if you were the captain? And rule number 1 was you couldn't change the captain. So don't give me that to change things. But what I tried to do, if I got a great idea in these interviews, I had a public address microphone right at my desk, and I'd hit the button and I'd say, Benfold, this is the captain. This is the idea I just got. This is who I got it from. It makes sense to me. We're going to implement it right now. But as part of that implementation, the sailor who gave me the recommendation had to be part of the implementation team, so that they would take greater ownership and make sure that they saw it through to completion. And as an entrepreneur, my job is also to find the right people to delegate to, so that they can execute on my ideas. And so that's one of the things that we as leaders need to understand is, we could be a font of great ideas, but if we get bogged down doing $10 an hour work on the implementation, we're going to miss out on even greater gains. So what I tried to do was to not get bogged down on what I call, $10 an hour work or the implementation. And I found the right people to do the implementation. And then I could just supervise and lead them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's bring some of your wisdom down home in the last minute or two of our discussion, because as the captain of a big ship with a huge amount of responsibility, and the parallel to that often is someone in a family who feels a great deal of responsibility to make sure that the family finances are in order, you can't necessarily be, or maybe you can, the person at home barking orders and telling people what to do. Any advice you could share with our listeners about how to keep a family team or a family ship afloat in terms of its finances?
That's a very difficult question, but what I do is I lay out the goals, and then I ask everybody else, how would you accomplish those goals? And what I tried to avoid was telling people what to do and how to do it, because then they don't take ownership and they don't have any skin in the game. So I think that the formula to our success was finding a way to get everybody to feel like they're part of the process and that they're going to own their results. And so if I sit there at home and tell people, don't spend money or no all the time, they're going to become resentful and they're not going to understand why. Mm-hmm. But if you let them in on the big picture and say, how can we accomplish this goal? I think then they take greater ownership and they'll be more supportive of the decisions that are made.
All right, I think that is great advice. It's a type of thing that I have to tell you, Mike. I speak to my clients about. My day job is that I'm an investment advisor, and I often work with families, and unfortunately sometimes I find that one spouse or the other is a little bit too domineering in the way the money is handled, and it's really important for people to realize that we're all in it together, because if one half of the ship is going under, then the other half is going to go under as well. We've been talking to Mike Abrashoff, who is a best-selling author, but even more important, he dedicated years of his life in service of the country in the Navy. So first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for doing that, Mike. And in the last few seconds, just tell us, how can people follow you and follow your work?
Well, thanks, Doug. My website is glsworld.com, Gulf Lima Sierra World.com. And I give about 100 keynote presentations a year to companies. And I've also got a talent development company where we can map core competencies of your organization to a leadership development program that can be done, just for 15 or 20 minutes a week. And over a period of time, we give you the confidence to become better leaders in your own business or in your own community.
Wow, that sounds super. And we will put links to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Mike Abrashoff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Doug.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.